Mind over matter, overcompensating, overstatements, crookedness related, the soul's churn in return, mental overstimulation, one word, riveting, it tethers my pilot, streams that are promised to make seeking less.
Greetings. Just setting up. You are through to Poultry Journal Podcast. I am your host, Alex Murdoch. I have a few questions, of course. But I wanted to share something and just unpack what I had in mind, what I was thinking about. And then I'll just gonna share where I'm going with all this. As you know, I always start with a quote. So let me just go about sharing where I'm at with this. So this is the quote for the day. There is no seat for defeat in the realm of kings, feeling godly like the chimes of these times that transcend. Never to trendset, but to approximate with cadence as to make amends. Never brain dead, thus like clay makes, as these words make even the dead pontificate. In the making of the brain cells, all is great if you know what is well. Never a drained spell if you could see the beauty in the holder. For in the milliseconds of the eyes, I sigh for the needles that tweaks may be in need. Thus I proceed to tell of the ill trees that remain, so unique only the brain can feed. Word is the antidote, it was said. Thus, if I choke, just throw me some paper and pen. Now, before I get into a few questions, I just want to share two definitions, two things I want to kind of speak about, you could say. But before I get there, two things. Discipline. Definition. Discipline, the practice of training people to obey rules or a code of behavior, using punishment to correct obedience. For example, a lack of proper parental and school discipline. Duty, according to Google, a moral or legal obligation or responsibility is a duty to uphold the law. What is your duty in life? What discipline do you adhere to as a way to make your vision come to fruition? After all, there are no gains without a sacrifice. I would argue in such a premise as I'm speaking, the need to succeed has got to be as deep as the need to breathe. That's kind of like where I'm coming from with it, you know. I have more things in mind, but I have three questions. These are the three questions I really want to speak on. The first one is, before I go into that, there's one other thing I wanted to speak on. There was, I got this from the New York Times. I was just kind of doing a little bit of research and just kind of inquiring about it. And the supposition of what I'm speaking about, it was to do with some research to do with AI. And as you know, we're in the age of AI, and as a result, there are certain byproduct of having such technology, such as the effects of AI on creativity, specifically writing. Because as you know, you can easily get AI to create something for you or write something for you. Now, there was a lot of opinions given by students, and I was pleased to see that most people thought, there's still an importance it's still important to know to be good at writing, to create for self, that type of thing. So that was cool, but it drew me to this question, which is one of the first questions I really want to ask. Is AI a threat to creativity, specifically writing? When you're talking about being lazy, not putting the work in to be great, that type of thing, is AI a threat to creativity, specifically writing or anything academic related to that degree? This is more a general thing I wanted to speak about. I'm sure everybody's heard about, the J. Cole dissing Kendrick Lamar. This is a hip hop piece dissing Kendrick Lamar. So I really wanted to understand, or do you agree with him apologizing? I've been laughing about that for days, because I was just like, I couldn't believe that. So yeah, that had me going a little bit. Final question. Duty or discipline? Isn't that the premise? Duty or discipline? So these are the leading questions I have for today. I really want to hopefully tune in and have a discussion with certain people about these three questions. But first things first, let me have somebody I really wanted to kind of chime in and speak to you about this. So let me see if I could tap in and get him to kind of share his thoughts on this. Just give me a sec. New to this, so let's see if I can get him.
Hold up.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Why won't it let me go on video?
I'm not sure. You can't get on?
Live act, hold on. Live access need to go live video as a guest. You can go live. Live access.
Maybe figure that out for next time. But yeah, you can hear me clearly though.
Yeah, I can hear you clearly. Yeah.
All right, for everybody that's listening, this is my good friend, philosopher's poet. We had a collaboration recently, a few episodes ago on my platform, and it was a great. We had a great discussion, great jousting, intellectual jousting, and he was the first person I thought about to have this discussion with. So did you hear what I was speaking about, the discussion I had? I know you were quite busy today.
Yeah, so I just chimed in. I heard the three questions, interesting questions, by the way, and I left a couple of comments. When you mentioned that J. Cole thing, that was my comment. But we'll get on to that. My answer's that kind of basic, but I think let's start with the juicier. Let's start with the AI first, because that is an interesting one. speaking on personal experience, even at work and outside of work, obviously people have been creating art using AI, music.
Yeah.
And I think the first thing to acknowledge is actually AI is in itself a creation. We created AI, so in that sense, we've taken on the role of a parent as such. And for AI, in one sense, the value of AI is only as important as what we teach or put into it. It's like a child, it's only the value of a child's values or character is only as important as what the parent instills within that child. Now, that aside, that in itself lends itself to the fact that we're still creative in one sense or another. The second sense is that we don't look at AI as a creation, we look at it as a tool in practical terms, which means it can be used to make life easier or harder. But unfortunately, AI has crossed this line where people have been turning it to creative endeavors, and I would say it's become a real grey area. And for me anyway, I've struggled with this because it brings into like two big scenarios. The first is, what is the legitimacy of AI creative capabilities? Is it sort of like a repository of data and ideas that it uses to create new things? Because if it is, technically you could say that all of us do that throughout history. We come up with new ideas, partly influenced by a repository of other people's ideas, learning and influence. The intangible bit we can't describe is a bit where we believe that there's some sort of inspiration that what we can't quite fully comprehend, but it is what it distinguishes man from machine. So I'm not sure AI has crossed that point yet, but it does show how far you can get with the idea of what I would call the bottom-up approach.
I suppose for me, if I could jump in, I understand what you're saying about it being a tool, but at the same time, I'm more I guess where I'm coming from with it, I'm more looking at the takeaway from being a primary source of creativity, specifically for not necessarily things to do with just like everyday stuff, or like like a synopsis for a book or something like that. But I'm talking about merely the creation of such. I suppose I'm looking at it in a sense of like this could potentially be the steroid to inject into creativity. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes, I get it. The takeaway for me is I feel like the way in which AI is being used, because the burden lies of humanity, us, and how we choose to use AI, means it become less of a steroid to creativity and more of a, I'm going to say a handicap, just because of the way it's used, not saying it in itself is. I'd love for AI to be a steroid to creativity, or to provide further expansion. That rests on how we collectively use AI or how we apply it. It should be, in theory, it should allow us to elevate ideas. It should allow us, but unfortunately, we're in the space where AI is being used based on the limitations of how people think society should function within existing ideas of economics and existing ideas of how that relates to ethic and fair. So which means AI rests itself to something that people look at as something to replace creativity.
I mean, we're speaking and we're being very specific about what we're kind of look into, but at the same time, there's so many places you can go with this, and also the potential of AI, because as we know, it's early in the process, in the progress of it, in terms of like you could say it's in the infancy at this point. But at the same time, what happens when it advances to a point where the potential is so much more greater, and just in the sense of like, it's not only greater, but the potential for abuse becomes greater for that person that's supposed to be original. You know, it is. I guess what I'm saying is potentially could this be the death of originality? You know, we speak about so many things as a creator, and I think potentially AI being what it is, it could take away from so much of what we've seen or we've witnessed over the years as being, man, this is greatness, you know.
Yes, it could potentially cheapen what we consider as something that's creative or something that's even considered classic, depending on what your definition of classic is, you know.
Yes.
You know the saying, to whom much is given, much is required. Well, that's humanity in a nutshell, and we're in the same position. As AI grows and develops,
yes,
much is required in order to understand how to responsibly use it. Or AI might already have developed in such a way where it seems to be responsible for its own learning.
Yeah.
Remember, in the early stages, there are already biases within AI. There are already teething issues around things like even racial bias. You know, so the danger of AI is it's still fed ideas from human beings, and you know, in a way in which you and I might be, and in our immature state, we might cling to certain beliefs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Let's get on to J. Cole.
Yeah.
So speak to me. What happened? What did you think about that? Because that was basically a pull out to me. Like, what are we doing here? How can you diss a man like that and then you? All right, I want to hear what you got to say. Go on.
So keep it plain and simple. Like, obviously, like with hip hop, I grew up in the day where, you know, if you had beef or something, you didn't back down. You just saw it through. You know, it ran its course. You never back down. You might like come to an amenable situation with the other rapper, but you never apologize. I know that sounds kind of immature, but I think in the frame mind, weirdly enough, of like hip hop and like kind of, you know, the bravado around it, and you could argue maybe I'm being immature here and saying he's apologized, but it depends. I think the other thing is, why did he apologize? Sometimes it's not what you do, it's why you do it. Obviously, for hip hop heads and for that certain attitude, especially.
Or should we say hip hop purists? Because I think we're coming from, me especially, I'm coming from a purist mindset.
Yeah. And I think because some of the most, what's going on here? Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
Some of the most entertaining periods of time in hip hop have been when you've had beefs. I remember the first, obviously people remember like East Coast, West Coast, people remember even like Cannabis and LL, and I think there was a certain element of pride and but then at the same time it's a disregard for like, what's the background behind this? It's sort of like someone's kind of either taken my crown, or someone's like kind of someone's got a point to prove. So it is it's very anticlimactic. I'm trying not to think as a hip hop purist here. And the fact that if I want to be objective about it, as I said, it's why he apologized. And so maybe my bias and my purism, if that's even a word in the hip hop sense, doesn't allow me to that clearly see the fact that actually there are levels to this in terms of self-reflection, you know, and responsibility.
Fair enough. I think for me, it's not necessarily wrong or right. I think it's a derivative of the culture as we know it. And you mentioned a little bit, you talked a little bit on that initially when we started the conversation. But for me, I'm going back to the culture of hip hop and what you're supposed to do in that situation as opposed to what happened. That's where I'm coming from with it. And I wasn't really quite happy to see how he went about, having this whole unraveling and just taking it back, because I think a lot of people feel the way I feel, or think the way I think, as somewhat of a purist when it comes to hip hop, and what that encapsulates, somewhat disappointed. And we can go on about this for a long time, but specifically what I'm pointing towards is the culture of hip hop, and what happened as opposed to what was supposed to happen.
Yes, yeah. Hence why I was saying it's all rather anticlimactic, and I think almost you have high expectations of certain rappers. There are very few rappers in the game these days where you could say they have real, I'm going to say, talent or real, lyricism. And obviously we've got two rappers who do, very, could say respectfully. And so it is disappointing from the sense of my and yours expectations of how it should play out. You might be disappointed, but expect that from someone else who you don't see as on their level in terms of ability, skill, acumen, even depth. For both of them in terms of what they talk about, But I think that's also why it was just disappointing, because I think in my head I'm like, okay, this is going to be awesome. There's going to be some sick stuff that's going to come out of this. I'm going to be, you know what I mean? Like, hyped. But then again, what I'm saying is that's a culture, and obviously culture is never objectively good or bad, and sometimes culture is one way or the other. So for me, it's just more thinking like, is this 40-year-old me, or is this like 22-year-old me? Like, 25-year-old me. I'm still gonna take it though, because it's in my blood. It's in my blood. Like,
I mean, man. Like I said, we're coming from we have a purist take on this whole thing. So I suppose that's why we're speaking from a point of disappointment and surprise. The fact that he retracted his statement in a sense that, and I'm withdrawing, man. I'm not feeling that at all. Especially as how it's not the first time these two had the chance to go at it, and Kendrick did kind of just go out, and he was on a mad one like a while ago now, I believe. But the fact that you're going with a guy that you shouldn't be trying to play with him, and something like this happened.
That was like 2013, 2014.
It's 23 hours.
So I'm struggling to find understanding where he's coming from. Do you get what I mean?
I get it. Yes.
Okay. So, and finally, duty or discipline, which one would you say resonates with you more?
Wow, this is probably the most interesting question. Not to say the first two they were really good, but this is interesting. I would naturally gravitate more towards the word discipline, but I need to actually revisit that and say, why am I moving towards discipline? The fact of the matter is, discipline towards what? And the same thing is duty towards what?
I would suppose, say. Sorry, go on. What were you gonna say? You have the floor.
we just have the presupposition that discipline is aimed towards a goal or objective that we have. Because I heard you use some other definitions as well. But when I think of discipline, I ever think of self-discipline, i.e. the control you impose on yourself to work towards a goal, or I think of discipline as in a parent and a child. And I usually go more of the former than the latter. So I would say I would prefer discipline, but then my definition of discipline as a grown man for me is basically how I achieve things, how I have a level of self-control. Duty, less so, and that probably because I feel like when I first think of the word duty, I kind of think of misplaced duty or duty being something you do.
Yeah.
You can have a duty to somebody or someone.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you have a conviction for it. Sometimes duty is required practically in life, like you got a duty to your job, whatever that is. Not everyone loves or believes in their job. People can have duty towards their personal goals because they have conviction within them. It's the same with discipline, but I think discipline for me feels more intrinsic as well as extrinsic. It's not just something that unless you're saying duty to yourself.
I guess that was something. Let me break it down more since we have time. We're in no rush, so let me go deeper into it because I don't think I've done that yet. Just give me a second. So let me break it down. So this is what I'm saying. I'll go to the top. So I'm sure, obviously, you know what the definition, but I was pretty much speaking from what is your duty in life? What discipline do you adhere to as a way to make your vision come to fruition? After all, there are no gains without a sacrifice. I would argue in such a premise, as I'm speaking, the need to succeed has got to be a deep one. Deep as the need to be, in my opinion, of course. Is there a thing that exists that you find the demands of such importance and the need to be? If so, you know, that's kind of like where I'm going with it. I have more, but do you kind of get the gist of where I'm coming from?
Yeah, that was beautifully said, by the way. Yeah. So first and foremost, I would say my duties to myself, but then people will ask me, what do you mean to yourself? Do you mean to your ambitions in life? Do you mean to your to which part of myself? You know, when I say I have a duty to myself, what I mean is to put context is I have a duty to the part of me that I believe speaks to me most clearly, that I believe is the highest aspect of myself. Yeah. The thing I discovered about myself that allows me to live to a purpose, and that purpose for me in life basically is if I want to be able to give to myself, so I can give to others.
Yes.
However, I have to acknowledge as well that there are levels to this. So that's very idealistic.
I agree.
Yeah, and then there are various channels materially in which that idea takes shape. But the idealism has to be met in very practical terms in my life. Like, in order to do this, I still need to operate and have a duty towards the things which feed me and put a roof over my head. Those things are necessities physically, but they're not necessarily, I would say, my heart's desire. They provide comfort at a certain level, but emotionally, intellectually, those things are merely support systems. They're merely a means to an end. So, but I have a responsibility to myself to look after both, to do both. I can't do one without the other. I can do the practical side. I can prove myself to the woman, but then my life, then I've actually forgotten what my actual intrinsic duty is to myself and to others. I can do the idealistic bit, but then that makes it impossible for me to actually go about it in the best way. And then I've got to take responsibility and say that I haven't really done that, because how can I claim one thing and claim these ideas and I'm not living that life or showing people how to live that life? So it's a blend of both. That's how I myself. Now you're going to say specifically, are there a couple of things where you say duties to yourself lends itself to others? Well, I would say in the nature of what we do and what we breathe and what we write, I believe that what we put on a pad, on a piece of paper, on a laptop, allows us to give to ourselves, but give to others. Others are reanimated. They breathe in and out the energy that's within those words that are merely constructs of the things we bring into existence.
Yes, yeah. I hear what you're saying. But you also acknowledge the fact that, you know, there are levels to this, and so perhaps the level that you kind of attained, that you're speaking about, where you are with this in terms of growth, somewhat you haven't reached to the point, and it's kind of like I mentioned, you know, where it's deep as the need to breathe, you know, because at that point there are no excuses, you know. When it comes to breathing, you make no excuse. You know, it's something it's a necessity for your life, and so unless it's to that degree, I would argue there are you become susceptible by default to distractions or being derailed, you know. So which speaks to or pretty much just almost in a sense life catching up with you. I'm sure you're aware of that saying. And it's just another form of being derailed, but it's more of a general sense where things just kind of come at you to a point where you're overwhelmed. You know, you've kind of reached your threshold of ways you can handle yourself or handle your situation, and so by default you can't commit to the degree that's necessary to go forward with your duty or the path. That's another way I like to think about it, the path to where you're trying to go, and now you don't have it. Now you lose that connection. You procrastinate long enough, you lose that connection to what you're trying to be about, or perhaps the culture that leads to what you're talking about.
That's happened to me many times. So I acknowledge that does happen, and it's bound to happen at some point based on the world we live in. And sometimes it's more about A, being aware that that's happening, and B, being responsible enough to take actions on what to do about it. Now, you might not be able to do something straight away, but it's putting plans in place. No one can forever exist within, let's say, the epitome of or the highest point of their consciousness 100% of the time. We couldn't practically live like that. Even the greatest so-called teachers and religious figures, or some of them through known human history, couldn't operate all the time in so-called source. There's a reason why, and I'm just nicking this and repurposing it for this conversation. I'm not saying I believe in what others believe in. I'm using the example that I always used to read when I was a lot younger, was going down the wide path being the path to destruction and going down the narrow path or the narrow gate. Now, there's some wisdom in that, in the sense that the path to yours and I is kind of our paths, in a sense, can be seen as narrow because there's all these other distractions and things. Some of them necessary to just live or survive, and some of them purely are dalliances with other temptations, shall I say. So there is a level of corruption, not physical, but I think every time we are pulled off the path and we procrastinate, maybe our soul dies just a little bit, and then we're rebirthed again, and then we find ways to incrementally ever work towards an idea of sharpening that skill of getting back on the path. You know, in that way, it's a distraction, but in the right way, it makes us stronger each time. And the acceptance that we will fall promotes an empathy and a compassion of us. We see other people rising and falling. So there are advantages and benefits if we're in the right frame of mind, and how we can use that energy, that destruction, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying there is a perfect way of this. These things coming to fruition. We're under no illusions, and to a certain degree, one would argue that to stay on your path or whatever you've kind of discovered about yourself, that this is what it is for me for the rest of my life, and I want to do this forever because this is who I am. One would argue that in a sense, everything has to fall into place, everything has to go right, and the more there's a level of finite, I would say, when it comes to these opportunities to kind of maintain and figure your situation to kind of stay in the premise. So I guess the point I'm trying to point at is that awareness and anticipation, all these things that just come into place. We spoke about before the process of transmutation, being a factor of this, and aware of the different factors that comes into play to actually not only maintain but to accomplish. And transmutation's a very useful tool, but it's a thing of the mind, and the mind has limitations, which is why sometimes transformation is necessary. I'll give you an example. I've been saying to you about our work's been kicking my ass through March, yeah? Now that's a big obstacle, but obviously in part some people might say it's a necessary one because I need to eat. Yeah. However, there might come a point where I might have to put myself in a position or make a tough decision where maybe I'd have to choose, do I do something else? I'm listening. Go on, I'm listening.
Where do I make a choice and do something else that's less time intensive, or do I take a risk with my life purpose? Am I willing to make that sacrifice? So at some point, life might present itself to me in a situation where I'm forced to make that decision. It's as if some people might say it's misfortune, but I might see it as in the grand scheme of things, life is pushing me to live to my truth and my purpose to the fullest. Yes. So at some point, maybe I'll have to face that. Maybe there's sort of like a spiral where the same situation that's trying to get into alignment for who you are and what you want to do gets ever grows that spiral until you're aware of the consequences. Now, and then, as you rightly said, there's a price to pay for everything. In terms of So perhaps one day it'll be, I don't have the money to make decisions, and then basically maybe I'm in a position where I can actually make a change in my life where I might not have some of the same comforts I have in life materially, but I'm able to live my purpose. Then it's like, okay, money is less of an issue and I'm willing to make a sacrifice. Do I actually have the courage to do it?
Yes.
But the universe is, or life is perpetually getting me to review and sacrifice those things that actually, in the grand scheme of things, are stopping me from being fulfilled and teaching me a lesson.
Understood.
It's funny.
I think, when it all comes down to it, to me, I think, as you said, there's a price to pay. So in essence, everything is all about sacrifice, primarily. Are you willing to sacrifice? Because when you think about, going back to the whole analogy of wanting it as much as you need to breathe, survival, that in itself is, it takes something to survive, and I think that in itself is it encapsulates sacrifice. Do you get what I mean? That's what it takes. And so when you say duty or discipline, to me personally, I think I would have to say discipline.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with you. In fact, I just thought of something when you were just as you were talking, and it was that the fact that well, not the fact, but I was thinking that in a way, when we're on our journey, sometimes it's good to appreciate the journey as well as the destination. We're reaching for something, but the journey, in a way, those experiences build up resilience.
Yes.
Because I know what you mean. It should be. It's like breathing. Our purpose, and it becomes like breathing.
Yes.
That sounds extremely idyllic to me. But then, in a world where idealism doesn't run the world, obviously we could be forced extrinsically to not live out that. So therefore, there's a useful thing behind the idea of the actual journey, the hero's journey, because it does build a level of resilience. It allows us to build up an inner peace and an inner sense of self, if not an outside sense of self. So the foundation being that which is within inside of us, it is the resilience that allows us to keep going. Knowing one day we'll realize that materially, in whatever way you think. And when I say I don't necessarily mean money, things manifesting themselves as in, soft or So that's the one advantage of the journey. It builds a resilience and it builds an inner peace, an inner calm in times of turbulence. So that's one thing I am grateful for, even though in the time that it happens, I might look at it in the actual space and time that does happen.
Yes.
Well,
I think what you said as well, which is just a facet of everything that we're speaking about, even though you're grateful for it, but it also speaks to the point of or the opinion that I kind of gathered over the years. When you decide and you make a decision that, this is your path and you make your way towards it, I suppose that's derived from the whole ideal is derived from transmutation that we're speaking about. Also, is that things tend to just materialize around you, life, or it's quite universal in itself, transmutation, but it seems that the situation life just paved the way, in a sense. If we just put in layman terms, or you want to go more universal, where the universe react to what you're asking it for, and things begin to materialize. And as soon as one way or another you start to make your way, and things start to continue to come to fruition. So that's pretty much where I was going with this whole discussion of duty or discipline.
have you ever, because the other side is, have you ever been in a situation where life has presented to you that which you desired, but you never saw it until it passed you by? Whatever shape that takes, because that's the other thing as well, where we can get so caught up with the mundane, everyday, the things that we need to do materially that don't keep us clearly on our purpose, that we actually miss out on opportunities. So that I can say that's happened. That's the other side in terms of being presented something and not seeing it clearly.
Absolutely. But my take on this is a little bit more objectively speaking. In my opinion, if that's something like that happens, then perhaps I'm not ready for that blessing.
Yeah. Otherwise, we would have seen it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because
I agree.
Because for what it means to be blessed with whatever we're talking about, whatever that situation may be, to maintain it, or to maintain that state or this accomplishment, that means you might not possibly have what it takes to maintain or to grow with that. Do you get what I mean? It's kind of like, I put it in simple terms, like, somebody winning the lottery.
Yes.
But you don't have the business acumen, the financial understanding to maintain and grow your riches.
Yeah, so you end up back at square one within
You end up back at square one.
Yeah. I agree with that those experiences pass us by because maybe we're not ready at the time. So, but I think what it does do is, even though we miss it at the time because we were meant to miss it at the time, because I think it's there to show us that it's possible, and that we're totally worthy and of the experience we desire. So I think it's presented in a way to say that actually it's not impossible. Don't lose hope.
Yes.
It's there for us to grab. So I think in that sense it provides me encouragement, because I'm like, instead of me thinking, oh, it's never gonna happen, now oh shit, it could have happened, but this rest, the responsibility for this rest, because I couldn't see it, but at least I know it's possible.
Yes, absolutely. That's that speaks to, and I think, I guess what I'm saying is, there might be distractions or things that come as in terms of blocking, firewalls, or making it impossible for you to accomplish. Well, that means that also, to me, reads that you're not ready, because if you can't figure that out, then you're most likely not going to be able to maintain it, even if you do attain it.
Yes.
You might be able to get it, but you can't keep it.
And that's worse. I think that's worse.
Yeah, that is worse. So but thanks for tuning in, man. It was just a great conversation, and I'm looking to do a few more lives weekly, so we'll keep in touch, and
yes, it's a pleasure, man. It's a pleasure.
We'll keep working, man. We'll keep doing this. But we'll speak again. We'll keep in touch.
Yeah. All right, cool, man. Take care. Bless you.
Yeah, same to you. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Shout out to Philosopher's Poet. Great conversation. But to wrap things up, I suppose suppose, to finish, how can you stand for more than just self? Because by default, to do for self is to learn to the ability to empathize with somebody else. What a prize when what you surmise comes to life. Have you bore witness to your dreams echoing beyond reality? What does that look like? Is it warm? Is it cold? Does it add a certain glow to your soul? Are you a creature of growth? When did you graduate to this discipline that subscribes to such eminence? In my opinion, so this was fun. But thanks for everyone for tuning in on platforms. Looking forward to doing some more. I had some time off, but we'll be back. We are back, and I appreciate everyone for tuning in, and I look forward to continuing this mental jousting and expression and just sharing. So I am your host, Alex Mata. Some know me as the Mad Poet. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Mind over matter. Overcompensating. Overstatements. Crookedness relating. The soul's churn in return. Mental overstimulation. One word. Riveting. It terrors my pilot. Streams that are promised to make seeking less.